In 1948, a conflict began that would eventually become one of the most complex and controversial disputes in modern history. At its core lies a struggle between two different peoples who both claim the same land. To understand how this conflict emerged, we must travel far back in time and follow the long and often turbulent history of the Jewish people. The modern Israeli-Palestinian conflict itself will be explored in a later video, but first, we need to understand the historical roots that shaped it. Our journey begins around 750 BC, during a time when the Near East was divided into dozens of small kingdoms and city-states. These states were constantly navigating the pressure of larger empires that surrounded them. To the north stood the powerful Assyrian Empire, known for its highly organized military and expansionist ambitions. To the south lay ancient Egypt, another great power with a long and influential history. Between these giants existed a number of smaller kingdoms, including the Kingdom of Israel. The people of this kingdom practiced a form of religion that still included multiple divine figures, though the worship of Yahweh was becoming increasingly central. In 722 BC, the Assyrian army captured the kingdom's capital, Samaria. As the city fell, many inhabitants fled south into the neighboring kingdom of Judah, whose capital was Jerusalem. These migrations helped strengthen Judah both culturally and demographically. However, Assyrian expansion did not stop there. Their armies pushed further south and eventually established dominance over the region. For nearly a century, much of the Levant remained under Assyrian control. This period ended dramatically with the fall of Nineveh, the Assyrian capital, which was destroyed by a coalition led by the rising Neo-Babylonian Empire. Following the collapse of Assyria, two new powers competed to dominate the region, Egypt and Babylon. The struggle did not last long. Babylon emerged victorious and extended its authority across the former Assyrian territories. Jerusalem, however, resisted Babylonian rule. When the city rebelled, the Babylonian king Nebuchadnezzar II responded with force. In 586 BC, the Babylonian army besieged Jerusalem. After months of resistance, the city was captured and destroyed. The first temple, traditionally attributed to Solomon, was burned. A large portion of the population was deported to Babylon in what became known as the Babylonian captivity. In 539 BC, the Achaemenid Persian Empire conquered Babylon. The new Persian king allowed the Judeans to return home, and many made their way back to Jerusalem. They rebuilt the city and strengthened the foundations of Jewish culture by reconstructing the Temple of Solomon and compiling religious texts such as the Torah. In 334 BC, the young Macedonian king Alexander the Great launched his campaign to conquer the known world. Within just over a decade, he created a vast empire and founded many new cities. But after years of conquest, Alexander died in Babylon at only 32 years old, leaving no clear adult heir. His empire was divided among his generals, forming several Hellenistic kingdoms. Judea fell under the control of the Ptolemaic dynasty of Egypt. During this time, a Jewish community established itself in Alexandria, where the Torah was translated into Greek. Later, after wars with the Seleucid dynasty, tensions grew between Greek and Jewish cultures. At one point, an altar in the Temple of Jerusalem was dedicated to the Greek god Zeus. In 164 BC, a traditionalist Jewish revolt broke out. A Jewish militia drove out the Seleucids, retook Jerusalem, and restored the temple. For a time, the Kingdom of Judea regained its independence, but about a century later, the region was conquered by the Roman Empire. Under Roman rule, the Judeans launched two major revolts. The first, in 66 AD, led to the Roman siege of Jerusalem and the destruction of the temple. The only surviving section of its outer wall would later become known as the Wailing Wall. A second revolt followed decades later. This time, the Romans completely destroyed the city and killed or displaced much of the population. Afterward, Jews were largely forbidden from living in Judea. Many migrated to Galilee or spread across the Roman Empire, beginning a long period of diaspora. Toward the end of the Roman Empire, Christianity became the dominant religion, and Jerusalem turned into an important pilgrimage site. Jewish communities across the Mediterranean sometimes faced persecution, particularly under the Visigothic and Byzantine empires. In the 7th century, the rise of Islam led to a wave of Arab conquests. In some cases, Jewish communities supported the new rulers, hoping for better treatment. Under Arab rule, Jews were generally tolerated, while only polytheistic religions were forced to convert. In Jerusalem, the Dome of the Rock was built, making the city sacred to three major monotheistic religions: Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. Arab expansion also reached the Iberian Peninsula, which became known as Al-Andalus. About 5% of the population there was Jewish, and this period became known as a cultural golden age for Jewish communities. Meanwhile, in Europe, Jews were tolerated partly because Christians believed they were witnesses to the time before Christ. They also played an important role as merchants, trading between Christian and Muslim regions. This allowed Jewish communities to gradually spread throughout Western Europe. In the 11th century, the Seljuk Turks, originally from Central Asia, expanded their territory and captured Jerusalem. They restricted Christian pilgrimages, which triggered a response from Europe. Christian kingdoms launched the Crusades, military expeditions aimed at retaking the Holy City. On their way, Crusaders massacred many Jewish communities, whom they accused of deicide, believing Jews were responsible for the death of Jesus Christ. In 1347, merchant ships from Kaffa brought the Black Death to Europe. Within 5 years, the plague killed nearly half of Europe's population. Rumors spread blaming Jews for poisoning wells, which led to violent persecutions and expulsions, especially in regions along the Rhine and Rhone rivers. Later, when the Reconquista ended in Spain, the Catholic monarchs ordered Jews to either convert to Christianity or leave the country. Many chose exile and settled along the Mediterranean, particularly in the Ottoman Empire, where they were welcomed. Another important refuge emerged in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which adopted relatively favorable policies toward Jewish migration. By the 17th century, the region was home to more than 300,000 Jews, roughly half of the world's Jewish population at the time. But in 1648, everything changed. A rebellion by Cossack and Ukrainian peasants targeted the nobility and Jewish communities, whom they accused of being close to the ruling elites. More than 100,000 Jews were killed or forced to flee. These events weakened the Polish-Lithuanian state, which eventually collapsed under pressure from neighboring powers. Over the next 150 years, its territory was divided. Around 900,000 Jews suddenly found themselves living within the Russian Empire, where they faced discrimination and hostility. They became frequent targets of violent attacks known as pogroms, a Russian word meaning devastation. Because authorities rarely intervened, these attacks grew more common and more deadly. Many Jews began emigrating to the United States and Western Europe, where conditions were slowly improving. It was during this period that the First Zionist Congress was held in Basel in 1897, proposing the creation of a national homeland for the Jewish people in Palestine. However, the Ottoman Empire, which controlled the region, strongly opposed the idea. A few years later, the First World War erupted. The Ottoman Empire joined the war on the side of Germany. As the Allies searched for more support, the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour issued a declaration promising support for a Jewish homeland in Palestine. At the same time, Britain encouraged an Arab revolt against the Ottoman Empire, promising independence for Arab territories after the war. When the war ended, the Middle East was reshaped and divided between European powers. Palestine was placed under British mandate, and this moment marked the beginning of what would become the Israeli-Palestinian conflict.